The start of the 2022 Formula One season has fallen well short of Sebastian Vettel's expectations for Aston Martin. Vettel is out of contract at the end of the year, and even before the 2022 cars had hit the track in pre-season testing, it was clear that his future would be a big talking point. The four-time world champion was betting on the immense potential of the Aston Martin project to extend and revitalise his career after being shuffled out at Ferrari. Instead, Aston Martin's dreadful form at the start of 2022 only intensifies the scrutiny over whether Vettel will call it quits sooner rather than later. Vettel missed the first two rounds of 2022 because he had COVID-19, and watching those races from his sofa would have been a painful experience given how badly Aston Martin's year began. His own belated start to the season was then wrecked by an appalling mix of misfortune and mistakes in Australia, where he completed just 48 laps over the entire weekend. Vettel's comeback started with an engine failure towards the end of the opening practice session that forced him to miss the second Friday session as Aston Martin switched to a new Mercedes power unit. He then crashed out of final practice on Saturday with just 5 laps and no time to his name after losing control on the exit of the high-speed S's. That caused so much damage that Vettel would have missed qualifying entirely had a late red flag not delayed the conclusion to Q1 and allowed Vettel to get out and set a solitary lap time, which was a respectable 1 second away from a Q2 spot. Vettel said that it was the result of a little bit of magic from his Aston Martin team, but unfortunately for him, it was only a brief reprieve from the gloom. He did well to avoid crashing into the barriers during a trip through the Turn 11 gravel early in the Grand Prix, which was caused by a sudden 30 kph tailwind, but then he made a mistake that triggered a race-ending shunt before the halfway mark. Aston Martin team principal Mike Krack said the number of Vettel mistakes through the weekend was not normal, but he wasn't having a dig at Vettel with that comment. Instead, Krack suggested that Aston Martin itself had to bear responsibility. Though Vettel has had a surprisingly high rate of mistakes over the last few seasons, Krack is correct to observe that so many incidents in one weekend is not normal. There were a few mitigating factors, like the fact Vettel had been missing for 2 races and the reliability problem that cost him valuable track time early in the weekend. Even on normal laps, it's clear to see that the 2022 Aston Martin is simply a difficult car, and one that in its current form will struggle to make it out of Q1 on most weekends. In the first stint of the race, Vettel also reported it was a bit on the nose at high speed and had understeer at medium speed, which is an unenviable balance. But Vettel clearly contributed to his own downfall as well. He's not blameless for such a bad weekend because he's a vastly experienced driver who made mistakes at key moments even if he was driving a difficult car. And unfortunately for Vettel, the nature of Aston Martin's limitations mean that he may often find himself struggling to tame this car on the limit, at least in the short term. Vettel said before the start of the season that he had no predetermined conditions for the team to meet in order for him to sign a new contract. Vettel is intrigued by F1's new regulations and insists he remains excited by the project he is part of at Aston Martin, so he could stick around, and has talked about 2 factors that would be important in determining whether he does. One is what he'd like to see from F1 itself, the other is how Aston Martin would perform on track and off it. Vettel has been one of the harshest critics of the V6 turbo hybrid era, primarily because he loves older screaming engines and won 4 titles in a row before the rules changed, but also because of the Mercedes domination and F1's ever-increasing downforce dependence making racing worse. It's still early days, but F1's rule changes in the pursuit of closer, better racing seem to have worked about as well as could be expected. Unfortunately, because Vettel has an even less competitive car than last year, he isn't really in a position to benefit from how much the new rules have improved that. And this gets to the heart of Vettel's decision-making process. Yes, he has been curious to discover the new rules, but the impact they had on the pecking order, and specifically Aston Martin's place in it, was always his primary interest. How that has played out so far has been an unwelcome surprise. Vettel and Aston Martin did not have the first season together that they hoped for or expected in 2021. Back then, reliability problems in pre-season testing hurt Vettel's acclimatisation, and the AMR21 was hamstrung by the floor rule changes that hurt the low-rake Mercedes and Aston Martin concepts the most. So even once Vettel was comfortable in his new surroundings, he didn't have the podium-challenging, even race-winning calibre of car that the team had enjoyed the year before. Vettel reckoned that Aston Martin spent 3/4 of the 2021 season with the same car, as it was one of the first teams to switch its full focus to 2022 and the new technical regulations. The short-term pain suffered last year was meant to pay the team and its star driver back this season, but the way 2022 has started makes it clear that's not happening just yet. And that's bad news for Aston Martin's chances of keeping Vettel, who has made it clear he is most interested in winning, and that will determine what the future brings. He has always retained faith in the potential of the project, but this was meant to be the start of that potential being realised. So far that hasn't happened, and Aston Martin looks a long way from giving Vettel what he wants in terms of results. Vettel knows the Aston Martin project is bigger than the 2022 season alone, with the £200 million new facility that Chairman Lawrence Stroll has committed to and a mooted new engine project, all designed to set this team up for long-term success. It's part of a 5-year plan for Aston Martin to become world champion, but it seems unlikely Vettel will still be around by the end of that period, so he can't afford to wait that long for the team's fortunes to improve. Vettel said that this would be the year Aston Martin needed to show how good it is. He described it as a true test, and the results so far will be extremely disappointing. The porpoising problem Aston Martin's car is suffering so badly from means the AMR22 has to be run at a higher ride height, which is severely hurting its performance. In the meantime, any upgrades or setup improvements that should make the car better actually make no real difference, because the car doesn't work in reality the way it does in the wind tunnel or on the simulator. Aston Martin is adamant there are several tenths of a second to find if it can run the car as it has been designed to, but that performance remains entirely theoretical for now. In blunt terms, Aston Martin's miserable form is unlikely to improve unless the team can get on top of its key car constraint. The team admits this is not a short-term fix, so with no immediate improvement in sight, there will be plenty of people wondering if this means the writing is already on the wall for Vettel and Aston Martin. Especially as Crack admitted before the season started that Vettel would not be satisfied with finishing 12th or 8th, and right now, finishing 8th would be a massive result. But another factor that both Vettel and Crack have identified as being important is what goes on behind the scenes. While Vettel had high hopes for 2022, he also identified one of the key objectives for the team as proving it had a competent structure that either built a very good car from the start or could improve a troubled one through the year. Clearly Aston Martin is faced with the second scenario. Vettel will be disappointed to have discovered that, but it's too soon to write the year off. And if the team comes up with a solution or introduces a major concept change that transforms its fortunes, then Vettel's outlook will transform with it. Aston Martin knows that is necessary to keep Vettel's confidence, assuming of course that retaining Vettel is still a priority for the team. Crack says it is, and that means proving to Vettel that the team's structure has the potential he expects it to have. With so much at stake for team and driver, their first Grand Prix together in 2022 couldn't have started in a worse way, and the short-term prognosis isn't a great deal better. The only consolation for Vettel is that on a personal level the Australian Grand Prix is highly likely to be the nadir of his season. He says it can't get any worse than that, which is true, but it will need to get a lot better if we're to realistically expect Vettel to still be at Aston Martin next season or even in F1 at all.